I'm kind of shifting the focus towards applicable knowledge, and if we take a look at what we discussed yesterday, the key word as regards satellite imagery is accuracy and precision. But this is not the characteristic which is applicable to air contamination, because we are talking about kilometers and pixels, and the atmosphere is very fluid. There are a lot of changes ongoing in the environment, and there can be outbursts of contamination, and then in an hour's time it will disappear without a trace. Of course, during the war, it is very difficult for us to track all that, especially as our terrestrial system is very fragmented. But I'd like to speak about the gas component, because speaking about aerosols, we can have more detailed information and register it. But it's not enough just to record that information. We need to understand what's going on, how dangerous it is, and on the basis of this to conclude what are the causes of what happened. So we are talking about the Sentinel-5 speed gives a result of 3.5 up to 3.5 kilometers. In comparison with previous missions, we were talking then about dozens of kilometers, tens of kilometers. We used to have fires in 2010, and at the emergency situation service, we carried out some analysis, but it was very time-consuming, so we wanted to have an automated system which will be doing this. So we developed this system, and we are continuing to work on it. It operates in two modes. The first one is near real-time, which I call operational or near real-time. 2 to 3 hours after probing, we get data and can give information to the National Service for Emergency Situations and tell which areas are affected. Analysis on the online data and Sentinel-5 hub are available in about 1 week's time, and they're used for research and analysis of various indicators. Basing on this system, we'll speak about operational and regimented monitoring. Operational monitoring during the war, what we normally see is just one-off events. For instance, missile strike on the depots with nitrogen ammonia, and we captured that on the map. This happened shortly before the probing, so we saw the impact. Near the Siversky Donets River, there were fires, and we see a lot of amassment of CO gases. Speaking about urbanized regions, we can do downscaling on the basis of these data and analyze it up to 2 kilometers. But frankly speaking, most of what is going on during the war cannot be captured by us. There are outbursts and pollutions which we cannot capture. This slide could be the previous one, but I put it right here. It is very important to understand what we're dealing with here, because what we see by way of satellite data and the map is not what it appears to be.
Якісь там екологічні організації, які намагаються працювати з цими даними, присилають там якісь панічні листи, говорять, що вони зловили якісь потужні викиди, що це катастрофа, але буває так, що насправді вони не провели процедуру фільтрування даних. І ось, наприклад, карта, коли у нас біле поле, якщо б після фільтрування, до фільтрування це було абсолютно...
On the charts we have a white space before filtration, but after filtration you could find the relevant information. So for many it is strange that in the satellite data there are concentrations with minus concentrations. And this paradox is caused by the fact that if the concentration is below sensors' abilities, so they may accumulate mistakes and the wrong information we may get about concentration. Another important mistake, there is the map dioxide, sulfur dioxide, but this is the result of transferring the results of the volcanic eruption at Canary Islands. And sometimes we get requests that something happened in Ukraine, but in fact nothing happened. It's trans-border, cross-border transmission. So speaking about military activities and the consequences, it's easy to manipulate if we do not process properly this data. When we take February, when the war started, in terms of atmospheric air pollution, we saw the consequences even before the beginning of full-scale invasion. So when there was so-called military exercise to the east of Ukraine, there was a concentration of military equipment, heavy equipment, so the concentration we see was higher than it was before the war. And we see that in the east of Ukraine, on the occupied territories, there was huge concentration of pollutants discharged by heavy equipment. But we see some spots in the west, and if we analyze every spot separately, if we do meteorological analysis, trajectories of wind and so on, we see that these spots were formed not of our territory, but it was brought from other countries, and very often the western Ukraine gets pollution from the European countries. Very often they tell us that Ukraine is a dirty country, but in fact it's much cleaner than majority of West European states. When we work with the satellite data on pollution of atmospheric air, we must operate with information on discharges. And without discharges, we cannot say what we see. The second option, that if during war we have no information, we see some spot, we increase the time lapse and we see what's going on. For example, in March, on the territory of Russia, near our borders, we observed chaotic emerging of various spots, which didn't look like mistakes, but we couldn't understand what was going on. Then later, when we analyzed that, we noticed that they moved along the major highways towards Ukrainian border, and there was a stream, a flow of military transport. So this way we may see how the pollution in Kyiv reduced in March compared to normal state. Very often in publications, including the leading mainstream scientific publications, the information is presented without analysis. We worked for a year and produced such a publication where we analyzed the meteorological conditions important for some periods beginning with days 2 years, and we noticed that reduction of CO by 10 to 15%. It was just natural reduction, and we observed it in our clean territories and cities, in Romanian highlands, in Carpathian mountains. What can we see how the military activities impacted the pollutional air in Ukraine? So increase of the dioxide of nitrogen in the cities, as well as at the beginning of war, we saw the impact produced by automobiles. It's also interesting to analyze various parameters related to other pollutants, for instance, with the dust. After the Kakhovka Dam was undermined, and we realized that they are going to have a dry lands over there and even the desert. So we see on the first map Oleshki sands we can observe very clearly, and it can be used as a model. So where we see that where there was Kakhovka water basin, we see no changes, and then with the time, in fact, we have a new desert emerging. Later on, vegetation will cover it, but currently we have most probably the biggest territory, which is bigger than Oleshkivsky sands. So, conclusions. What do we need to do after war? We have a need to integrate data because this data has not been integrated at all. And the second is that the parallel development of all sources of data and methods of getting information without centralized coordination. So we don't have modeling of such system, so it's fragmented practices. So what we do need is to integrate all this data and to develop them all in parallel at the same time. So relevant computer systems should be set up. By the way, our Finnish colleague told us about these computer technologies, so and we could use this for modeling territory of Ukraine. So we use the Finnish capabilities for this. Thank you for your attention.